Is bigger than we could ever imagine. There's all these honeypot women, such as Meghan Markle.
It is interesting how she's exposing her as a yacht girl, someone who was paid off by rich men to go and hang out.
Wasn't there some speculation that she was on Epstein's yacht at one point in time? There was like photos with her and Prince Andrew way back in the day when she was like in her early 20s.
He knows that Meghan Markle was a hoe. He knows that Meghan Markle had a relationship with Prince Andrew. He knows that he is stuck in California. He knows he has wrecked his life with a D-list mattress act.
Wider picture is half in, half out, doesn't work. And let's look at how are the royal family using and potentially manipulating their role of soft power. And they just, like their parents, they love themselves some money, don't they?
He was infiltrating all the royal families in Europe, and how you infiltrate is through the men. And men, if you have a weak man that loves women and that will have sex with anything, they test you. They see how far you'll go. And these men are so stupid.
Statement from the lawyer was so smartly worded. It was vague, and it was vague by design. So that's why I think it was a warning to Meghan. If I sit here with my professional PR hat on, looking at that statement, they go through so many drafts, and it's, you know, up to kind of 5-10 people around a table drafting that. Every single word in a legal statement holds weight.
Prince William means business. He's had enough. He wants to clean the monarchy, and it's all now in the hands of the courts. Meghan Markle is in full mode panic along with Harry, because they both know what they did, and they both know that what they did could be criminal.
I go to somewhere like Soho House, if you know, or any private members club. Like, normal people don't do that. We go to the pub. You know, why go somewhere where you're not allowed cameras and everything?
The bigger story here is that the half-in, half-out royal plan was never going to hold. When you look at how the monarchy uses soft power, image, access, influence, you start to see why this moment feels so volatile. The claim now isn't just gossip. It's that Meghan's connections may have started far earlier than the public timeline suggests.
David Boies, who was Virginia Roberts' attorney, who wanted to call Meghan Markle as a key witness in the civil lawsuit against Prince Andrew, were very clear and specific that Meghan Markle was a past close associate of Andrew, and she participated in everything that was going on.
Reaching into circles linked to Prince Andrew and Epstein, raising the stakes beyond what most people assumed. Now the allegation sharpens. Meghan is described as someone who was, at least for a period, a close associate of Prince Andrew, close enough to potentially witness what was happening around him. Those words are attributed to Virginia Giuffre's attorney, presented as a matter of record.
Then Meghan is doing her best to make this Hollywood comeback. So, I mean, she will be absolutely terrified about the idea that this House and Habit investigation is finally going to drop. I mean, I'd love to see how Sunshine Sachs, who is the PR company famous for dirty tricks, back on board after she sacked Meredith May.
And if that framing is true, it explains the tone shift. Because it's not just scandal talk anymore. It becomes a question of proximity, knowledge, and whether someone could be pulled into legal scrutiny as the pressure tightens. For years, the story goes, powerful people have worked to bury traces, scrub photos, mute witnesses, and keep the narrative controlled. But now the dam is cracking.
One of us has been quietly tracking the cover-up for 8 years. So again, these words really matter, Lauren, because what she is suggesting is that for 8 years, there has been a cover-up.
Jessica Reed Krause, the blogger behind House and Habit, has announced she's releasing what she calls an 8-year investigation, claiming she's kept folders of material since 2018, names, screenshots, testimony, and alleged patterns of behavior. And she's signaling something even more pointed, that earlier legal interest in Meghan as a potential witness may suddenly make sense in the context of what's about to be revealed.
Jessica Reed Krause writes, I have all the scrubbed info. Soho, Epstein connections. Now, that is clearly a reference to Soho House.
This is where the video tries to anchor the claims to a first-hand source. A former model, introduced here as Barbara, is positioned not as an online commentator, but as someone who says she moved inside the same elite social ecosystem. The narrative claims her proximity came through relationships and industry access, placing her inside Epstein's orbit, and presenting her account as the kind of testimony that reframes rumors into something more direct. The implication is simple. If she really saw what she says she saw, then the wider network wasn't accidental. It was structured.
Picture of Virginia Giuffre, the late Virginia Giuffre, as a much younger woman, with the words, "And maybe it will make sense now," why VG, clearly a reference to Virginia Giuffre, originally wanted Meghan to testify at her trial, which, remember, we discussed last week, is something that Virginia Giuffre's lawyer, David Boies, had previously gone public to the Daily Beast about.
The narration pushes the idea that Barbara isn't speaking in hypotheticals. She's portrayed as someone who recognizes the locations, the social pipeline, and the people who keep showing up around them. The argument being built is that this isn't one isolated set of accusations. It's a familiar circuit. Soho House, yachts, wealthy patrons, and high-status figures, where introductions and favors allegedly function like currency. And in that framing,
I was at Epstein's condo a few times for parties and events because they were all affiliated. So, I always saw underage girls there. I always saw models that were from Eastern Europe that barely spoke English. They were there, side pieces hanging out with these millionaire guys.
Meghan isn't described as a bystander to the scene, but as someone the scene already knew. Then the video pivots into evidence mode, arguing that images and location context matter more than anyone's opinion. The narration claims there were attempts to relabel where certain photos were taken, but that visual details in the background contradict the official framing. And the point of that isn't geography, it's timeline. Because if the location is what the narrator says it is, it places key moments uncomfortably close to Epstein-linked spaces and turns the conversation from speculation into chronology.
Like models like me that are just like the show for the agency. And then in the meantime, the Eastern European girls and the other girls are getting human trafficked.
It's amazing how Epstein managed to infiltrate these women and of course Meghan Markle.
Here, the narration highlights a specific trip as a hinge point. Meghan being flown to Istanbul for a Soho House opening weekend in 2015. The emphasis is that she's listed only as a guest, while others are named, framed as a sign she wasn't the featured figure, but was still brought in and placed in the room. And the narrator treats that as the core question. Why would someone without real status be moved internationally for an elite event, unless her role there served a different purpose? To understand what's being alleged, the narration says you have to understand Ron Burkle, the billionaire tied to Soho House, and the inner circle that allegedly connects people, venues, and introductions.
Rina Shulia was Jeffrey Epstein's last known girlfriend. She is on record saying that the only times she flew on a plane, went on a yacht, or whatever, was with her boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein. And here we have Rachel Meghan Markle parading.
The story frames Meghan's friendships inside that orbit as meaningful, not social trivia. The implication is that the names being mentioned aren't random celebrities. They're gatekeepers in a system where proximity equals opportunity, protection, and leverage. The narration escalates to a broader claim that Burkle is described by multiple sources as close to Epstein, and yet his name rarely surfaces in mainstream coverage.
Went to Soho House a lot in London. It was a scene like Harry was always there, partying. He partied a lot. I saw so many people in the Soho, and it was dark. It was a lot of escorts were there, a lot of models were there. It was definitely a scene. Ron was there.
Then it lands a pointed detail meant to connect the dots. When Harry and Meghan left the UK, the narration claims they stayed at Burkle's house in Canada. In other words, the video is arguing this isn't just about scandalous individuals. It's about networks, silence, and who gets protected from scrutiny. This section is constructed like a timeline breakdown. The narration walks through dated posts and photos, then introduces the Yacht thread, placing Meghan alongside people the narrator claims connect directly to Epstein's world. The thesis is that the public fairy tale timeline doesn't hold up if these trips and associations happened when and where the video claims. And by the end of the sequence, the narrator frames the key point as undeniable.
I think that's maybe like a little spot where they set up the meeting, and maybe they meet girls there for sale or whatever, and maybe there's some sort of underground tunnel. I don't know, but it's definitely a scene exactly how Cipriani's upstairs was a club in New York, and it was the same vibe.
The proximity, the people, and the locations, taken together, are presented as a pattern, not coincidence. The narration then adds a second trip earlier in 2014, described as even more explicit in its alleged linkage, photos, aircraft identifiers, and flight record framing. The purpose is to stack corroboration. Not just one questionable weekend, but multiple moments that, if accurate, place Meghan and close friends in the same travel ecosystem reportedly used to funnel guests. The narrator's intent here is clear. Reinforce that this isn't a single blurry rumor. It's an accumulation of breadcrumbs.
After the Netflix series, where Doria is so clearly pushing fire, this is and she's a real Uriah Heep, and it's racism. Everything is racism, racism. I thought, no, you're.
The narration returns to the attorney's statement and frames it like a legal blueprint: jurisdiction, association, and potential knowledge. The emphasis isn't that guilt is proven, it's that the language is carefully engineered to leave doors open. The narrator treats that careful wording as a signal. The legal system doesn't speak casually, and when it speaks this precisely, it's usually because it's positioning for what might come next. This is presented as a lesson in how power communicates. Legal statements are drafted by committees. Every word weighed, every ambiguity intentional. The narration argues the vagueness is not weakness, it's strategy.
He would probably try, maybe she was a honeypot for men.
What do you mean by that? Like honeypot? Like for people who don't know the meaning of honeypot?
Honeypot is like a Marilyn Monroe where they like get paid to like lure the men, you know?
And then it draws its conclusion. The statement reads less like a request and more like a message, an alert that someone is being watched, and that silence in the media after initial reporting doesn't mean the issue went away. It may mean the opposite. Now the video zooms out into a system explanation. The claim that Epstein's influence wasn't limited to isolated crimes, but was allegedly a method of infiltration, using access to men in high places as the entry point. The narration frames it as a repeatable pattern: find the vulnerabilities, exploit the appetites, and use social environments, clubs, parties, exclusive travel, to create compromising proximity that can later be leveraged.
Oh God, I get what's going on. She is the honeypot, and she gets the women for the men.
Isn't that something?
Because they were trying to do that with me too.
The narration then adds an emotional beat. If any of this is true, it suggests not just scandal, but manipulation. People pulled into a trap they didn't recognize until it was too late. The conclusion the narrator wants you to sit with is scale. That what's being described isn't a celebrity rumor mill, but a sprawling structure with multiple honeypot figures, and consequences that could reach far beyond tabloid headlines. The closing narration crystallizes the storyline into a countdown: years of suppression, a whistleblower dismissed, new document releases shifting perception, and an investigator promising receipts. The through line is momentum: more insiders, more corroboration, more willingness to speak. It's framed as a tipping point where the protective fog is thinning and a long-built narrative is about to collide with new claims, new evidence packages, and renewed scrutiny. Finally, the narration frames a stakes question. If titles were stripped from Prince Andrew because of Epstein-linked scandal, should the same standard apply elsewhere if allegations are substantiated? And it ends on the central suspense hook, whether Meghan knows too much, whether that explains protection, and whether panic is setting in, because the story as presented here is finally breaking through containment.